Hey girl, how are you?
I'm so good, even better now that we have hit record and we're going to get into all the juicy biz chats.
Can't wait. Thanks for having me.
Of course, anytime. I feel like it's been so long since we've spoken, so super excited to catch up.
Yeah, agreed.
Time's just flying by at the moment. It's just not good at all. So why don't we start with the way we always start this podcast,
Okay.
which is just who are you and what do you do?
Okay. Tiffany English. Go by Tiff most of the time. I, at the moment, am spending most of my time in Access Offshoring. So we're an offshore recruitment company specializing predominantly in finance roles, but we do a lot of admin, accounts, marketing, etc. So that's where I'm spending most of my time right now. But I also have a consulting firm that specializes in software implementation in trades and construction. And I've spent most of my career in kind of that business improvement space.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So obviously, running your own business, have you had other businesses in the past? Was there a career? Were you from finance, or recruitment? How did we
Good
get
question.
here?
Wow. How did we get here? This has been quite the journey. I went to uni and did a double degree in marketing and PR. I actually started
cool.
I started doing accounting and thought I'm way too loud for this classroom. So I swapped and then I went back and finished accounting.
Oh, wow. So you've got lots of study under your belt.
Yeah. And then I did do an MBA a little later as well. So I did all of that pretty much before I was 26. I got all of that done. But I started work really early. I started my first business when I was probably 17, maybe earlier. I mean, if you can count selling sandwiches on the down low in the locker rooms at school.
Yes,
I do
early. Count that.
I started early. And
that is so funny. I love it. That's like the modern day equivalent to a lemonade stand, right?
Yeah. I bought my own toasty machine and I would bring all my bread and I'd actually just toast it and be like, who wants a toasted sandwich for way less than the canteen? So it's probably, yes. I've made some good money out of that.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
So that's probably where I started. And then, I started an events business in Perth for a little while, which was kind of looking back, I was so naive and little, right? I had a lingerie store in Perth for a couple of years.
That's cool.
That was cool. Enjoyed that a lot. So we had a shop front. We used to do parties. And then moved to Melbourne first, then moved to Queensland and started my consulting firm first. And then it kind of evolved and the offshoring business was next, and who knows?
Hang on a second. How did you go from retail lingerie to a software consulting?
Good question. So I had, so I was working a lot. So once I finished uni, I started in a door manufacturing company, actually. So we did building products, predominantly doors. And so I started in there and then I ended up working for a plumbing and hydraulics company in a general manager position. And so we implemented software, we hired people, I made myself redundant. And then I basically went through trades businesses as a consultant, but most of the time they would bring me on the books and I would spend 12 to 18 months and I would implement software. And I have a real knack for what's going really slowly in this process, right? This isn't fast enough for my ADD brain.
Oh my God, who knew impatience would be a skill set that you take?
Totally. And so it kind of started from that. And so when I got to Queensland, I actually worked for Riviera.
Oh, cool.
For a while, which was awesome. But I did the same for them, built up their service division, implemented software. And then once I finished my MBA, I thought, well, I've got to recoup some of this money. Maybe I'll go out on my own. So that's kind of how it started. So I loved implementing software. I loved the idea of looking at how a business flowed and went, okay, we could actually implement some software to make this far more streamlined. And then the other portion of that was making sure I had the right people to support that. And so the consulting firm still exists. I'm not spending a lot of time in it. I've kind of handed that over. And then the offshoring business is the other side of the fence, which is all about people and making sure we've got the right people to run the team.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And have you taken your process or your awareness of going, I know what works into a business to make the systems and processes hum. Have you taken those approaches from your consulting business into Access Offshoring?
Yeah, totally. And I suppose there's two parts, right? A, how do we do it internally as a firm? And
Yes.
I'd like to think I'm as good, but I'm way better at doing it for other people's firms than I am our own.
That's always the case for every business.
But like even for, I'm spending so much time now, particularly with accountants, because I'm going, hey, how can you actually implement this person? But where do you put them? What makes sense? How are they working? What are the reporting lines? And actually just helping them kind of restructure the way their business flows. And that's probably why we're standing out at the moment in terms of an offshoring firm, is because we're going, actually, how do you do this? How do you set this up for success? It's not just, here's a human, let me place them.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, that like business improvement never stops, right? Like
I wish.
it never ends. And then you implement something and you might grow out of it. And then, which, so it's that constant evolving.
How do you approach that? So I'm just thinking, so I always ask selfish questions, but I always, think about like, people dialing in who are in the business, who are perhaps at that, maybe, there's that messy middle phase of business when you're kind of trying to get to the next level, you're scaling a little bit. What is your process of actually looking into your own business or looking into somebody else's business and going, that's broken, or we want to move to here? Like, do you have a process or a few questions you ask yourself that help with clarity?
Yeah. One of the biggest things is to look further than where we are right now. Yeah. Right. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, is that businesses will implement something that suits them now. And they underestimate where they're going. And you can grow out of things much quicker than you ever expect. Yes. So I think that's one of the biggest things is, okay, hold on, what does this look like in 12 months or 2 years or even 5 years? And then secondly to that, what do we need to succeed? Like what are the key metrics that the business owner needs to know whether we're ticking all the boxes? And one of the things that I always do is I sit down and get a pen and go, right, let's write out what you're doing, right? And I sit with frontline staff a lot of the time and go, show me what you're doing and who else could be doing that. And when you actually write out the process of what someone does, which tends to be what they've always done because they don't know any different.
Yes.
You just go, oh my, look at this. It's turned into like this huge workflow where if you got a black texter, you don't need half of it.
Yeah.
So it's just breaking it down. What are we doing now? And then actually, what do we need to do? And then once you've got that, you can go, okay, what do we need to solve this?
It's really interesting too, because I feel like, and perhaps this is more service-based businesses, but I feel like a lot of times you have staff who say, I'm maxed out, can't do any more, too much. And the business owner's freaking out because they're like, I've got to hire more staff, but I don't have the revenue to actually support it. And then they're getting themselves on a bit of a hamster wheel of, the more they grow, the more they've got to hire. But this seems like a great way to actually try and stop the bleed a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I mean, a lot of business owners don't, this is actually quite a skill. And I talk about it a lot. It's not something that's taught even at university. The process of system implementation and optimization and business improvement is not something that's discussed or taught very well. And so it's that process of, hold on, what is that staff member doing? And, there was actually inside our firm, I was speaking to one of the people in our accounts team and I said, all right, let's just do a recap. What are you doing? And I do this regularly. Show me what you're doing. And she's like, oh, I'm pulling this together every week. And I said, how long is that taking you? She's like, oh, about 3 hours. I was like, I've never once looked at that. Why are you doing that? Like, I don't care.
Oh, wow.
And so it's this stuff that you just forget that at one point it made sense, but now it's irrelevant.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's interesting too, like one of the things you said was, what is the business metrics that actually matter? And to your point, I don't even look at that report. So that process of actually sitting down and understanding what KPIs, what metrics actually grow the business and show the health of the business versus, you can measure everything, right? You can measure hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of metrics and use every piece of software to do it. But if you're not just focused on a couple of things, then you're typically just spending a lot of time reporting.
Yep, totally. And it's the same, like, from an offshore perspective, when you start to grow your team, you're like, right, what is my current team doing? Where can I elevate them? Where are they doing grunt work that we don't need them to be doing?
Yeah.
And offshoring is a great way to kind of throw in someone at a obviously really cost effective solution and help elevate this person. Because that's the other thing, right? People get overwhelmed by grunt work more so than anything. So if you can remove that with cheaper resources, that's helpful, but you're also now elevating and building a team of structure and growth.
And like you say, when you elevate somebody who's, especially if they're in a customer facing role, they can be more strategic for that client.
100%.
Retaining more business, growing more business.
Yeah, opportunity cost, right? If they're stuck on entering data, what aren't they doing?
I feel like business owners should just do this on themselves.
Oh, totally. And I still like probably once a quarter I'll go, okay, where am I spending all my time? Because you just forget. And so I'll actually, it's a pain in the butt, but I go through and I spreadsheet it and go, should I be doing that? And it's eye-opening.
Yes. Yeah, I do mine's not very, it's not a good process. I don't know how to say that, but what I do is like, whenever I'm doing a job that I hate,
yes,
that's when I stop myself. I go, okay, I'm bored and I don't think this is actually the best use of my time. And I write it down. So I just have a little brain dump
list.
Love
it.
Yeah. So it's like, it's a feeling for me. I go, this sucks. Okay. I probably shouldn't be doing this, write that on a list. And then every month or every quarter, I can go to that list and go, okay, who should be doing that? So I kind of do it as I go rather than, spending a couple of hours reflecting.
That's a great tactic.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I guess it depends on your vibe. So question for you. So we've talked about obviously business improvement and how you add value to people's lives, but I'm interested in the, going from employee inside these organizations to actually doing it for yourself. What was that leap like? Did you find it a big leap, or did you find that you were already like an entrepreneur inside those organizations anyway? Or what was the actual leap like going from employee to business owner for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. So within those roles, I was definitely running the show.
Yeah, cool.
Right. I definitely had full ability to make decisions. I definitely treated the money like it was my own, although I must admit it's much nicer when it's not your own.
It's less stressful.
Yep. Although it's funny, and it's something that I probably take for granted, but I don't have a lot of fear over money. And so, that was probably the biggest thing. So I remember the day that I decided I wanted to go out on my own. And my grandparents had traveled over from Perth, who practically raised me. But my granddad is one of those very typical, from that generation where he's safe, secure, get a job, earn your money, make sure you. And so I remember going back to my place and they were there and I said, right, I'm done. I'm going to quit tomorrow. I'm going to go out on my own. Now's the time. I finished my master's degree. What's the worst that can happen? Right. Granddad's like, no, you can't do that. Right. keep working and start it up on the side.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't even done that. Right. It wasn't like a side gig. And I said to him, I can't, Grant. I'm working 70, 80-hour weeks.
Yeah.
Right. I said, I physically don't have the time to do this as a side project. And it was getting to the point in that role that I'd probably was ready to move on to the next project anyway. Someone else could replace what I was doing at that point, basically. And I remember saying to him, I'm highly employable. The worst that's going to happen is I run out of savings and I'm on my own. Yeah. Right. And so that's what I did. I quit, and I was pretty fortunate because I picked up a couple of clients really early on a retainer. So I was kind of secure, but I just did it. And I certainly haven't looked back. I mean, that was February 2018. So this month, is one of the anniversaries. So I think I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, if I want to call myself that. I'm always, I don't know about that word a lot of the time, but it was always
it's a bit of a catch-all term, isn't it?
Yeah. So it was always going to happen. Didn't know where it would evolve to. And I can't ever have one thing on at a time, which is annoying in itself. But
I hear you. And so was it smooth sailing? I mean, you picked up a couple of clients early on. Has your business journey just been like all sweet? everything I've learned, I've applied. It's all been good. Have there been any challenges along the way?
Well, yes, several. Okay. So at the start, it was pretty good. Of course, there were a few weeks that, like, I remember I was talking to my husband the other day, who I met about the same time as I started. He goes, do you remember, I remember you saying to me one week, I don't know how I'm going to pay wages in 2 days. And he goes, but you didn't care. Like, he's like, you had no worry. I was like, yeah, I'll just go find the money, right? Like money's abundant. I'll go find it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
So there's always challenges like that where you're juggling that need to deliver and make sure you've got the cash coming in, and all of a sudden you're overseeing so much.
Yeah.
But we grew so quickly. Like I actually hired 2 full-time staff within the first 6 weeks.
Sure. What? Oh
we
my
were
God.
it just happened. And at that point we went, right, we need to pivot, because we were doing consulting across every facet of organization. And so we ended up pivoting to trades and construction, because there's no way everyone can be across the software systems relevant for every industry.
Yeah.
So we pivoted and we did some clever marketing focused on like association levels. So we were kind of doing one-to-many versus one-to-one. And we just built trust and built networks really quickly. So the consulting firm grew. The biggest challenges with that, as with any service industry, is staff. Because you're having to basically, to get me out of income generating, it meant I had to replace myself, because we were essentially consultants, and hiring consultants and training them in the way that the company has identified as best practice is difficult.
Yeah.
So that's probably been the hardest thing. And for me, from that perspective, is as I started to step out of that to focus on particularly the offshoring business. I think the hardest challenge for me at that point was that I underestimated how much my visionary and just overall, rumbling up of the team, how important that it was. So we actually lost like 5 staff in the space of 6 months of me walking out.
Wow. Holy shit.
Yeah. So it was stressful.
Well, so what did you do?
You go back in, you build it back up, and you go, right, we've got to think through. It was, the business was at a point where it didn't operationally need me. It was, but I didn't realize that I held so much of that visionary and pump up, and you really underestimate that as a founder and as the owner. People want that. They want the communication with the owner, and and when you start small and they're talking to you every day.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden they're not talking to you at all because you've had to put in hierarchy, because you can't have 10 direct reports.
Yeah.
That was the biggest challenge for me. So you basically, that was a huge learning, and it was like, right, let's build this with structure initially, and actually get to a point where you're, arm's length from team, and you're building the culture, but at arm's length.
Yeah.
So that they don't feel like they have to constantly be connected to you to succeed in their role. So that was the hardest part.
It is really interesting. I went through something similar with Scrunch in the early days, where we were super scrappy, everyone's on the tools and it's fun. We're making it up as we go along. There's not a lot of systems and processes. And I remember it getting to that breaking point of, we can't just keep hiring more people. So we have to really get smarter about the way we're working. And it's like everything got serious.
Yes.
And so the fact that we wanted people to, report, we wanted people to follow certain processes. We wanted people to be accountable to metrics to make sure that we were improving. We lost staff too, because it's like this big change, right?
Totally.
It's just different than what they used to.
It's different. And so that's probably like, it's such an interesting transition when you go from startup, for lack of a better word, into that, hey, we're actually getting to a point where we're established.
Yeah.
There's people that just fall over, and it's to be expected.
Totally. Yeah.
It's to be expected. But you don't expect it at the time.
Yeah. Exactly. I know. But you're right though. Then you kind of just come in and go, okay, this is what it's got to look like now at this level of business. And fortunately, the new people that come in now, that's all they know.
Totally.
So it's okay. Yeah. Things break, and then you put them back together in a better way.
Yeah, and it just helps for the next one, right? Like Access Offshoring is a little easier. It's a half service-based business, but essentially it's, we're placing people.
Yes.
We're almost like a labor hire firm. Can you call that a product when it's people?
Sure.
Technically we are.
Yeah.
So it's a little easier in that respect. But you're still at that point where you need all these resources, and then you get to a point and you go, all right, now we have growing pains.
Yeah.
Right. We're at that point where we need to change the way we do stuff, because this won't sustain us.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? I think oftentimes when you start a business, you think, if I just run, at some point I'll hit all of these amazing milestones and I'll be able to relax. But it's just like every milestone you hit, everything breaks and you've got to start again.
Yeah. But that's the joy of it, right? To an extent.
Absolutely.
And for those that want to go on this path, that's the fun of it, if you can see it like that. But you do definitely need to find the balance, right? Like you and I have felt it. You got to watch out for you. It's relentless.
It is. So how do you look out for you? What's your look out for me strategy?
I've had a lot, I hit a bit of a health issue last year, and that really threw me into gear significantly, right? I went from high performing 100-hour weeks without a question with 2 kids, and I sit on charity boards, and I like literally didn't stop. Very happily though, right? Like loved it. I was like, yes, run. Loved that. Thrive under pressure. Loved the complexity of it. And then my body went, I've had enough, and threw me on my ass for months. And so when you go,
what happened?
Yeah, I got mold poisoning, which caused swelling on my brain. And it started off with neurological pain down the right side of my body. And then it basically just went into all these neurological issues, poor processing, poor memory, like couldn't remember anything at all, chronic fatigue, chronic anxiety. I basically went from doing 100-hour weeks to barely being able to do an hour a day.
Holy shit.
So you go, okay.
That must have been so mentally frustrating to just know what you're capable of and then have your body go, not interested.
And you almost, like, I felt like my IQ had dropped, Annie. Like,
wow. Yeah.
Literally, I felt like I'd turned dumb. Like, what is happening? I used to
what is wrong with me?
But so it was like a kick in the face. And obviously at that point, my body was, while I thought I was, high performing, my body was obviously exhausted.
Yes.
And so I got sick because my body was already burnt out. Right. So very much acknowledged that, went through a few months of feeling sorry for myself, as you would expect.
Yes.
And then went, right, like I've just got to A, heal, but B, work out what life means for me now. What if I can only ever do an hour a day?
Wow.
And so I started thinking like that. Yep. So I really just started shifting, like, okay, if I've got an hour, what is absolutely the only thing I can do today?
Wow. Yeah.
And if I got anything more than that, great. That was a bonus. And so for me, it was really like, okay, I've got to protect my mornings. I used to train heavily. I was super fit. So that wasn't necessarily losing, but I think just from it, I wasn't mentally resting.
Yes.
Like even when I was at the gym, I was listening to audiobooks constantly, and I was doing high intensity training, and so everything I did was on overdrive. And so it's just helped me to slow down, definitely be more present, and just put more structure around my life and go, hey, these are the things that are important to me. And I found it really has changed the way that I work.
Yeah.
And I'm really intentional about what it is that I'm doing. And there are still days where I'm now back to doing a full work day, which is great. Yep. But, there's days where I'm like, oh shit, it's frantic, and that's fine. But for the most part, I'm far more intentional.
Wow. That's such a huge process. And it's really, I mean, I know there's going to be so many people actually listening in going, oh, I think I'm at that burnout point, but it's, so easy for people to ignore early signs.
You can't.
And that's kind of the message, right? Because if you just keep ignoring, at some point, your body, your mind, life, like something will kick you in the ass.
Yeah, it will. It will absolutely. And that's what happened to me. Like, no doubt I was getting a chest infection every 2 months. And, my body was like, seriously, slow down. But it'll throw you. And I think, so for one of the things I've done is I've not put work emails on my phone this year. And do you know what?
My God.
No one's died.
Stop it.
Nothing's blown up. Nothing's caught fire.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And I just go, do you know what? Like, it just becomes a habit where you're constantly engaged and turned on by this device where I was getting 350 average notifications a day, not including emails.
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, okay, this is ludicrous. Like, how can I perform like this?
Yes.
And so a simple thing, like I'm just not doing that anymore. I'm not having emails on my phone. If someone needs to contact me, pick up the phone and call me. Otherwise, I'll check my emails twice a day.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's okay.
Yeah, you're so right. And it's kind of like what I find too is, so I'm a habitual check my email on my phone person. But what I catch myself with is it's like you're in this constant like expectation, like either please let something amazing happen, like let a huge sale come in or whatever, or you're in this like, holy shit, I hope nothing's on fire. So
Yeah.
and it's like
Yes.
this stress, this constant stress you hold in your body attached to this device that you're going and checking and checking and checking. It's like, okay, nothing. Okay, nothing. Okay, nothing. It's like
You're
this
so
is such a
right.
waste of time.
It's the dopamine here, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just tech. It's just it's no different to scrolling to try and find something to solve the world problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a big game changer for me. And I think it's just a matter of, hey, just slow down and really think about it. You know, there's things that you're probably doing in your workday that if you didn't do, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It really fucking doesn't matter. Sorry, I
Yeah.
just swore. You might have to edit that out.
No, this is a total sweary podcast. Don't worry.
Yeah, I just think it's just be intentional, right? And I'm certainly no expert at it, but it's certainly taught me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How have you, so, I mean, it's good to say to people, be intentional. And I think on the surface, everyone very quickly can look at their to-do list and go, okay, those are the things that are going to move the needle. But is there anything that you, I guess, any advice on being intentional? Like if you reflect on what's really worked to grow your business or what's worked to get the most out of your people, have there been key themes of things that you as a business owner have had to prioritize to be intentional about making sure your business is a success?
Yeah, goal planning is huge for me. So I block out and do 12-week planning. I don't do annual planning. I do 12
Cool.
weeks because
like
a year's
that.
too much for me.
Yep.
I'm looking at them now. So I sit down and I go, right, what am I doing for the next 12 weeks? What are the things? And I actually break them down into my values.
Cool. Yes. Keep
So
going.
I actually
enlighten.
So that's how I go, right. So my core values are growth, freedom, connection, health. They're the things that are the most important to me, right? And so I break them down and I go, right, what for me to grow or for my businesses to grow, what are the core things that need to be done in the next 12 weeks?
Yeah.
For me to continue having freedom, and it might be financial freedom, it might be, freedom to do what I want when I want, then what does that look like?
Yeah.
And so I go through and I actually break it down like that. And I've always got like, I know what the future holds kind of thing, or what I want it to hold. And then on a Sunday, I sit down and I review those and I go, right, what do I need to do this week? And what did I do last week?
Yeah. Wow.
But one of the biggest things, and this is where I think people often go wrong and fall over with goal setting, is don't overpromise or overcommit to yourself. Look at your schedule, right? Like if you've got 5 days of back-to-back meetings, the likelihood of you ticking off 7 goals in a week is impossible, right? So then people get deflated and go, oh, screw this. This sucks.
Yes.
So I intentionally look at my week first and go, okay, like next week I'm traveling to Perth. There's probably going to be one goal on my list because I know I'm in Perth. I know I'm in back-to-backs. I just physically can't fit it in. So why apply the pressure to myself if I can't do it?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the biggest things.
You're so right. Like we've got to remember that life changes, like work life, like ebbs and flows. Some weeks you're right. Like literally the last 3 days I've been in back-to-backs, got nothing done, but you can't beat yourself up. You kind of got to go, okay, I know Friday's my clear day. That's when I'll do X, Y, Z. You've got to remember that there's not just 5 free days of just working towards those goals.
Totally right. So that's probably one of the biggest things. And the other thing for me, I don't know necessarily, but in terms of size as a business, but when we hit 5 or 6 people, probably, we implemented, I think I might've told you we implemented Traction. I think so Traction is, Jenna Wickman wrote it. It's just this book and it's a really practical book around how to set up company goals and how to sit with your team and how to structure your meetings. So we set up that, and that was the only thing that got us through.
Cool.
Yeah. So that highly recommend. Yeah. Highly recommend that book. So that was what was kind of important to us, and that what gets us through. And I have personal goals on there too, because that's just as important, right?
Definitely. There's got to be a balance.
Yeah. And some weeks I'm a better mom than I am business owner. And other weeks I'm killing it at both. And other weeks I'm not killing it at either. Yeah. Doing my best.
Absolutely. That's all we can bloody ask sometimes.
Doing my best. But just spend and make it something nice. Like I take myself to a cafe or I go sit somewhere and I, make that reflection of your week and be honest with yourself. Like, did I do it well or didn't I? And if you didn't, that's okay. But look at how, and I think you just need that level of discipline if you want to achieve cool stuff.
And I do love your don't set yourself up for failure. Actually reflect on what time you have.
Look at the calendar. Yeah.
I love that. I make sure with mine, because mine is so big and lofty, I actually say stop looking at that big goal and look at all of the steps. So I chunk it down. And I'm like, if you don't go through each one of these steps, that big goal won't happen. But just looking at that big goal, you're like, haven't hit it, instead of going, oh, I made progress.
What are the milestones? Yeah. It's just milestones. And I don't know about you, but I don't, I hit a goal and I've moved on, there's no rewarding. I'm like, what was that a goal? I can't remember.
I have just decided I'm constantly drinking champagne for something I've forgotten to reward myself for.
That's what it's all about. Business isn't easy, but it's enjoyable to connect yourself with the right people, and it's enjoyable. The part that I love the most is that I can give people so many opportunities.
So I'm going to just leave you with one last question.
Okay.
So reflecting on your time in business, any just standout piece of advice you would give to women in business who are in the thick of it right now? Anything that's kind of, I know we've talked about a lot of different tips and tactics today, but has there been any kind of North Star for you that's helped get you through the tough days?
I often tell myself, you've already gone through so much pain. So why stop now? Right? Like it's so much closer than you were yesterday. But I don't know if that's very encouraging. I don't know if that's a good mindset to have, right? Like why give up when you've already killed yourself a few times? Look, I think everything is possible. Yeah. Right? Absolutely anything is possible. And it comes down to what you're willing to put in. But everything comes. Like, don't spend so much time stressing about it. Yeah. Enjoy the process. Like, it's so much easier to just be stressed and constantly on edge. But that's, I don't think that's a nice life necessarily. So just enjoy it. I do not believe in work-life balance. I just believe in do what needs to be done at the time. I think just enjoy it.
I love it. What better way to end a podcast? You are amazing, Tiff. Thank you so much for spending your time with the Spark community. You are awesome.
Thanks for and now we've got a dog barking. Benefits of working from home.
Perfect timing. I love that.
Thanks, Dan.